The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
Blah, 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 blah. Hey, it's episode number 149. It is 218 days till the man burns as of this particular recording. It is the first episode of 2024. I celebrated New Year's Eve with a new-to-me tribe of Vegas-based burners, and I had the most amazing night and sunrise, bonding with multiple amazing humans whom I immediately knew were going to be in my life for a very long time. The Vegas burner community continues to blow my multicolored socks right off with their warmth and love and support. Like a moth who is drawn to the light, it seems as though your humble host is similarly drawn to blinky shit in the desert. I love Las Vegas so much that my family and I are currently actively researching property investment opportunities. Not 100% sure yet what this commodification part of the journey will take, or what form it'll take. But if you're a Vegas-based listener, this might be a good time to reach out and say, hey, because I might be your neighbor soon. But back to today. Today's episode came about, which has nothing to do with Vegas. To be quite honest, due mostly totally for personally selfish reasons, I am officiating a wedding in Colombia next month. My first one. It's my first time officiating. It's my first time in Colombia. A lot of firsts happening. It's the wedding of my dear friends, one of whom was a guest on this show, Dr. Gomez Padua, from episode 140, entitled Addiction to Certainty. So from bearing witness to their budding relationship, to the evolution of it, the inspiration came to me to build their wedding ceremony around rituals and practices which draw on, ancient philosophy and some of the hippie stuff that Myra and I have always been into, overlapped with the groom's roots and energy and the evolution of Myra's own identity and career in academia. So anyway, I need to come up with some shit to lead people in at this wedding. And I was like, fuck, where am I going to start? And it turns out that I'm BFFs with someone who's kind of got a whole lot to say on exactly these kind of topics. You heard her voice most recently on episode 131, a mental health roundtable with two Kims. Returning to the show for her third time is one of those Kims, Dr. Kim Perkins, throwing her hands up in the air, waving around like nobody cares. Kim has a PhD in positive psychology and is an organizational psychologist with extensive experience in high-level conflict resolution. So she's got street cred as an academic, but secretly, she's also a massive fucking hippie. Also, she used to be my housemate. So Kim and I have spent many late nights talking about exactly all this kind of stuff. And we've been talking about one day doing a podcast about exactly this kind of stuff. So, what it turned into was a much more complex conversation discussing some of the structures of where these idea systems came from. And a great deal more exploring how we got here as a society, as folks found themselves landing into these separate camps of spiritual versus science. I'm doing little quoties with my finger. You can't see it. But I did get some ideas of how to approach the wedding, which was quite lovely. Perks of being the boss of a podcast with 17 nerdy burner listeners. Anyway, today I hope to learn some shit, and I hope maybe you learn some shit. We're going to talk about a lot of hippie stuff that's often a part of casual conversations among our community. We'll discuss some of the history of these themes and vocabulary that is so common in our circles, and we'll get into some science-backed practices, science-supported practices and rituals that you, my dear listeners, may feel called to incorporate into your own daily life. Kim Perkins is with me today. as our guest to talk about that spiritual jazz, but also science stuff. Today's episode is entitled Scientifically Proven Quantum Manifestation. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was a fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name, and it felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
Intro? What was that? Yeah.
Okay,
We're
so
here.
hold the mic up.
We're just doing the conversation now.
Right.
Sometimes people yell shit in the background too, and I encourage it.
Okay, let's do it. So I thought I'd do some nonverbals there.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, it's how did that all sound accurate-ish to the kind of
Pretty
stuff we're going to talk
accurate.
about? Okay.
Yeah, I'm an academic and a consultant to
Yeah.
corporations and nonprofits and, as you
Academic
put
for
it,
sale.
a massive fucking hippie. Yes, these are all true.
Yeah, we have spent countless hours having discussions about exactly these kinds of topics.
Yes.
As like a Morgan Freeman voice might say, when in the presence of the burning bush. And it's been, we've been saying forever, like all this different kind of stuff that I've been looking forward to seeing you speak more about. And, who knows?
And honestly, I have been, in this last year or so, really getting ready to speak about all of this, because I think I really tried not to talk about a lot of this earlier in my career. When I went to the positive psychology program at Claremont, I remember the department chair saying, well, we really need to stay away from acting like hippies here, because he wanted to make sure that we had a lot of cred and a lot of scientific credibility. And so everybody kind of, kept a lid on their hippiedom. But I'm ready to come out of the closet on this.
God, as you're actually describing that right now, it occurred to me, because we've had a conversation about exactly this evolution of academia and the sciences. And we've spoken quite a bit about it, I think, even on this show, in regards to mental health and therapy.
Yeah.
And about how more and more therapists are including themselves in that conversation with their patients, where like in the past they used to be this like Freudian figure that's sitting across from you behind a desk.
Yes, this illusion of scientific distance, except that people figured out that doesn't really work that well.
Interesting.
That's not true. I remember being in a book program and somebody's writing a scene with a psychologist, and they were doing it. They wanted me to check it for veracity, and they had them, nailing them against the wall like a little prized butterfly, as far as you are this and you are that. And I was like, no, that's not how psychologists operate. Maybe in the 1920s, I don't know, but not anymore. And I think it's really great and important that people are coming at it as a whole person rather than like the voice of God or the scientific authority, because I think that makes it helpful. I don't do therapy, I do coaching, which is slightly different, but I know that a lot of the times when I have self-disclosed or been more authentic about what I'm up to and what my perspectives are and my experiences have often been really helpful for people. So it's not, it's not always, and you certainly don't want to take over a session with all of that, but it's important to acknowledge that we're humans with limited understanding also, and biases and experiences, and not just an object, a mirror, know.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I see it as the next evolution in a lot of how we're navigating information in general. Because and we're going to get into some of this, but we've spoken quite a bit about how some of what is inspiring you, which is definitely overlapped with a lot of what's inspiring me, something just got delivered, has been, to some extent, I don't know, closing this gap between the different disciplines, because a lot of our generation, to some extent, and even like some of the younger generations and generations previous to us, have become distrustful of academia, which is like some of where...
of academia, of all institutions, really. Trust has lessened. And I think part of that is because people were trying to pretend a certain distance, that therefore they weren't subject to the same human frailties, the same biases, the same hopes for things that everybody else was. And that obviously isn't true. Right.
I this is good, because like the very first topic that I did want to hit was specifically about biases. And I think before we started when we were discussing this episode, we may have been talking about a different topic, but some of it I was sharing with you about how I used to read The Economist. Yeah, here it is. It's
here
okay.
It is. Yes.
It's a bed that got delivered.
It's a delivery, not a download.
Yeah. It's okay to call it out. Yeah. I was into The Economist, and what I really appreciated about them was that they were very direct and open about their conservative leanings. And like, I remember when, I forget which presidential race it was. I think they were endorsing Bush Jr. And I just really appreciated that they would break down the facts as you need to know them as a reader, and then who they're endorsing and why their endorsement was and what their bias for that was.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the lines, some of this information got lost in how we present these things, because it you see it a lot in news media. We watched like the rise of Fox News, and how more and more people were like, God, all of this stuff is like biased in one direction or another anyway. So like, is any of this even real? Is any of this even logical? Yeah, he just delivered the bed and left.
Oh, he left. He delivered and left. I was to make sure we weren't ignoring him standing. It could happen.
Yeah. This is perfect. Exactly. Like things like this. We're recording a podcast. A bed got delivered. We're just going to call out that a bed got delivered, and move on.
Yeah. Then make it part of it.
Right. And a lot of that narrative is as you're describing, like, it got reinforced because this distant authoritative figure sitting behind a desk was what presented to us as this person who owns knowledge, and they're downloading it to you, and you're wrong if you don't know it. So there was a lot of gatekeeping, I guess.
Oh my God,
around that.
There's definitely gatekeeping, and there's so much. I'm thinking about the very famous educator and theorist Paulo Freire, who I think has come up in many of our conversations.
Yeah.
Who, in his book, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, basically has been really influential. And talking about how your social position ends up...
Oh, what? It's not recording.
Oh, shit.
All right, we had a slight technical interruption, but begin at Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's pedagogy.
Pedagogy, that's how you...
I've always been unsure about how to pronounce that.
Sure. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
Fire away. Brazilian researcher, you were describing how much his...
Could be pedagogy, now that I'm thinking about it.
Right.
I have to look that up.
Yeah. So repeat describing Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Okay, well, this was an idea that there's an inherent political process about deciding what truth is. And that if you are trying to... with the idea that if the upper class education is being educated in your own interests, and therefore that people who are receiving that have kind of a leg up on people who are being taught this is how the ruling class thinks about things.
Right. And that starts in the education process, where we have
not just the education process, but just the knowledge creation process to begin with. So when Freire worked with dispossessed groups in Brazil. He worked with really, really poor communities. The first thing they would start with was like, what are we going to call things, and what are the relationships between things? The very like basic backbones of knowledge and how knowledge is created,
Right.
So that they could come up with a way of organizing knowledge about the world that would make sense for the way they actually lived,
Right.
rather than trying to make it look like the way Europeans had done it forever, or whatever outside information flows. And that sounds like really airy-fairy, but it ends up, the way we conceptualize reality through language, for example, really affects the way we view the world and what we think is possible and impossible, and truth and fiction.
Right. I have not read the book.
It's
gone down quite a bit.
It's technical stuff.
Yeah.
So whatever.
So the example that I'm about to present, I'm not sure if it's actually referenced specifically in the book, or if it's like people referencing lessons they've learned from it.
Sure.
So an application to a real world scenario of his research, and by all means chime in if I'm wrong here,
Of course.
was describing how it can be applied to the education process, like in a classroom. Because in an actual classroom, historically, the way it's been set up is that you have the teacher who's standing in front of the students and downloading knowledge into them, and there's a hierarchical process to that.
Yes, and and we call that is actually pedagogy.
Okay,
And
right.
it probably is G, now that I think of it.
Perfect.
This is, hopefully, one of the things I learned in my PhD is that, you can change your mind, and you should, to get better accuracy. So
Yeah.
And that's because that is literally, the peda means we're educating children. And so with the assumption that children are a blank slate and we're going to fill up their minds. This is, of course, not how we know humans operate at this point, even children. Nobody's a blank slate. You're operating on the experiences that you've had and according to the motivations of what is important to you.
And so the evolution of the process, a more progressive way, a way that's less about hierarchical power that's presented is the teacher and the students are learning together, but the teacher's position is to guide the learning process.
Exploring, basically. Exploring.
I had a note here that I wanted to kind of establish you and I's independent biases.
Sure.
Let's
I have
follow our
a lot
own
of
advice.
biases.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So first of all, I have the reasons that I studied psychology from the perspective that I did, and that's because I have hopes of helping people enjoy their lives better, live better lives, be more pro-social, help the communities. And so, I do see it through that lens. And that means that I'm less inclined to to talk about or be interested in things that contradict that.
Okay. Can you give an example? It's hard. I mean, it's kind of a vague out there thing.
That's a pretty vague out there thing.
Yeah.
Because I have hope and optimism that humans can do better than they are currently doing. And, again, I'm employed to help groups do better when at least somebody in the group wants to do better. Not everybody.
Yeah.
Then I tend to come at it with the idea that, of course, people can change it. Of course, people can do what they need to do. There's a lot of researchers and a lot of people, and strangely, a lot of people carrying out things like organizational change who really are very cynical about human behavior and say people don't do it unless they're highly incentivized. So, people only do things because for selfish reasons, and that these are the things that they kind of put forward. And I don't see that. I am interested. I mean, there are times when, if you want to get people to change, you have to throw a lot of resources at them, throw a lot of money at them, make them feel like rock stars, etc.
Right.
But I'm more interested in the things that are about when people want to do the right thing.
Right.
And let's figure out what the right thing is.
Yeah.
And assume that people do want to be good to each other, and that people do want to feel like good people. Not just feel like good people, but be able to, be good. If not good, we're all mixed bags, right?
Sure. No,
but the people who want to do better and feel better, and that's real and not just Band-Aid on the festering wound of being a human, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah. A bias to positivity and optimism.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah. No, me too. And I've had to like become sort of more aware of it, especially like as I interact like with my parents.
Yeah.
Because part of what I wanted to kind of note about my own biases as it's going to be applying to exploring the topics that we're going to be getting into as this conversation moves on, is I was the second person in my family to go to university, go to college.
Yeah, wow.
And I do, at that time, I saw it as just like a obligation that I had to follow through with. I didn't appreciate it until, much more recently in life.
Yeah.
And I look back on my Western education childhood and teenage years, and I was an insufferable prick to my parents.
The perspectives that come with time.
Yeah. They my parents were from Iran. Like they didn't go to college, and I was getting my education here in the West. And I remember being incredibly judgmental about their experiences and their wisdom that they had to present. And it wasn't until, I would say around, I don't know, late 20s or so is when I started to kind of like reflect back on that as I developed on my own, and I looked at it and went, oh, okay. They have wisdom to share that comes from a different experience. And there's ways to utilize that and to map our modern day education, our more science-backed understanding of the world, to some of their stuff that's more anecdotal. Yeah. And to try to come up with a more kind of like shared truth that tends to be more useful. Yeah. So that's my bias around this. And I think like that's why it kind of interests me. Like I need things to have some, I need it to have more knowledge-based backing, if you will. But I also want it to have some sort of time-tested wisdom to it as well.
Yeah, I hear you. You want it to be not just a current fix, something superficial that is tied to our specific moment in time, as so many of these things are, and even as so much of psychology is. Like if you read stuff from the 70s, you'll get a very different perspective on, what human behavior is, because it's based on what's happening then, for example. I will, that brings up a bias I would want to say, which is that I come from a family that is about 50% Bohemian intellectuals and 50% evangelical Christians.
Wow.
On both sides of my family, both mother's and father's family. That's probably partly why they hit it off. And so, whereas I definitely have an interest in the transcendent, I am more in the science and Bohemian intellectual camp. That also included a bunch of engineers. And I don't. And so my bias is that we don't need to have a what am I trying to say? We don't need a supernatural explanation for most of the stuff that are the experiences that we have of transcendence, connection, God. Right. All of these things don't require anything beyond the material, and they still can retain their meaning. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking for kind of an Occam's razor in all of this, right? Like, what's the simplest way that this effect could come across without requiring supernatural intervention? Yeah. And that's my bias. And some people will say, well, obviously supernatural intervention, because people have believed that for thousands of years. And I'm like, yeah, but really? No.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think like, I guess like that, that sort of evolves into like the next kind of thing that I have, which is important to be aware of, just even from the fact that I do this podcast, and I'm like aware that I have this megaphone through which people are listening, and that does inform my choices on how I work with our producers and stuff to book guests and the kind of topics that we get into, because I think that there is personal bias balanced with the responsibility that we have to community, civic responsibility. So even though in my own personal world, in the way that I navigate the world, I have some hippie ass shit that I do in my day to day.
Yeah.
That I don't. I'm happy to share anecdotally here.
Sure.
But I also am careful not to present that as with any sort of authority, right? And I think certainly, my size audience is like a speck in the ocean of what like somebody like Joe Rogan has, right? But I desire to have a sense of responsibility, ever present through all the projects that we work on Burner Podcast and the extended projects that we work on through this, to kind of ensure like, I'm into this thing and I'm going to share that with you, but also I want to bring you evidence that, here's my bias and here's where I'm just, I might be full of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just take this moment to say that I may have those 3 letters after my name, but I'm fallible. And also all we can ever do is the best we can do at the time, right? And so with any luck, we have a chance to revise our ideas upward and think about, oh, you know what? This is a better answer than that one I gave.
Yeah.
Right? Here's a better explanation for that. Here's more knowledge on that topic. And that to me is what science is all about.
God, that's when my brain is like looking for references of examples of where in media some of this stuff has gotten caught up. One of the examples that pops into my mind is Graham Hancock.
I don't know him.
He was a early strong public proponent of DMT. He's a writer and a researcher. His TED talk about DMT, I think, like got him a lot of attention because it was quote unquote banned by TED.
Ooh.
But basically all they did was like they took it down from their main channel because they're like, we don't, it's not, it doesn't line up with our platform currently. So he kind of in a lot of ways became a poster child for academia and science trying to suppress the truth, right? And it's kind of interesting because I feel like a lot of his narrative, I've not read his books and stuff, but like when I've seen his interviews and he's been on Rogan like multiple times, I think I don't listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. I've listened to like 2 episodes all the way from beginning to end. But I'm aware that he's been on like a bunch of times, and the running narrative seems to be about how he has like discovered truth, and academia and scientists are not letting his research be seen by the world because they're censoring him. And
it sounds a lot like the clickbait I see that says 5 Pasadena doctors tell you the wrinkle solution that they don't want you to know. And so that really feels like clickbait to me. I mean,
it is.
Academics don't have to suppress things.
Right.
When they reject articles from journals, it's because the methodology sucks.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the methodology has to really suck. Right. I have been a reader for journals. I've read a lot of submissions for journals, and it is all over the place. And there are a lot of articles that people write, that people with tenured positions write, that are really bad. And if they are rejected, it's probably because it just doesn't line up. And it not because, well, we've never done this before, so we can't do this now. It's not that kind of thing.
Right.
It's usually, well, you studied 5 people and they were already picked in this certain way. Yeah. And that is not enough to allow us to generalize to the rest of the population, because we can I mean, the simple way, I'm about to go into a rant here.
This is excellent. Yeah, this is exactly it.
The rant is that scientists think about, especially in social sciences, okay? Because in social science, there's enough variance in answers. Like, in physics, you can come up with a formula for how a certain thing behaves.
Right.
And be fairly accurate about it, predict it very well. With social science, you can only predict a range of behaviors based on what you do know, but there's a whole cluster of things you don't know about any given person.
Right.
And so even when I say that, if I were to use the phrase "studies have shown," for example, I could be talking about a really strong effect that, if I said studies have shown, and I'll use a nice hippie one here, right?
Sure.
That we're talking about, like there's a lot of recent research on ketamine, for example. Studies have shown that ketamine can have a positive effect on depression. That can literally be a super strong effect and still mean 6 out of 10 people, right?
Yeah.
And then are you going to be in one of the 6 or the 4? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And so all the rest of the studies that come after that is like, what are some of the circumstances that would put a person in one of the 6 or one of the 4?
Right.
And this is how research is slowly built up like an icicle, one little drip at a time, until somebody can say, I don't think you're a good candidate for this, or I do think you're a good candidate for this. Right.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to take the basic finding, it's still kind of a crapshoot for you. And that, I think, is what makes people say, they say that, this also goes for medical stuff, right? They said that this would help my sinuses, but it didn't at all. And it's like, yeah, because you were one of the 4 people instead of the 6 people, and because of there were all these other things,
Wow. More clickbait.
Yeah, more clickbait. So, but I think people have lost a lot of trust in science because of what you said earlier, as far as like the emotional distance,
Right.
and the sort of political way that people are going about talking about this. And also, I will say that I find a lot of people online who like use a list of argumentation flaws to browbeat people into submission. That does not help.
Yeah.
Because there is there is a human and an emotional context for knowledge creation. There just is.
Yeah.
And if we talk about that and include how people are feeling about that, rather than making it so that, science is separate from people outside of the realm of feeling,
Right.
or logic, or however you want to put it, rationality.
Right.
Those are not separate.
There's real quick, I do want to say as an aside, I am not by any means like well versed in the trials and tribulations of Graham Hancock. It was just a way to trigger a conversation. So you're free to email me corrections, but I probably got that wrong anyway. But
there are several people, and I'm spacing on their names now,
Sure.
but who have had their TED Talks 86th from TED,
Yeah.
and who like to talk about this as a badge of honor.
Right. Look at me, they're suppressing me. Yeah.
I don't know if being nearly 86 from TED is enough. You could say that's suppression.
Right.
Again, that's a different podcast, though, of like, does deplatforming equal suppression?
Yeah.
I would say no.
Yes. Yeah. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Let's not go there.
But on the topic of like what you were just describing, there is, and I imagine there's a name for this, the effect of, is it tribalization? Is it this human common instinct to take one side or the other side and to feel like these two sides need to be somehow at odds?
Yeah, it's definitely a way that people create knowledge.
Yeah.
Make sense of this just soup of input that we live in. Is by making two opposite poles, and therefore that automatically pits them against each other.
Right.
And so in my field, earlier I was talking about my bias toward thinking people are pretty okay.
Right.
So called theory. That's called theory X. There's theory X and there's theory Y. And theory X is that people are pretty okay and will do what you want them to do most of the time and try their hardest. And theory Y is that people are kind of stupid and need to be controlled, and you need to really incentivize and control them by any means necessary.
Right. And so when we see this effect of, and I don't know if the correct description is tribalization between like science fans, right, and the hippies. Like when I'm dumbing it down into these categories. When we see that and all the stuff that adds momentum to that, when we watch people getting into clickbait wars online and deciding that this is the side, I'm on the side of this, or I'm on the side of this, and then that continues to get that fire continues to get fanned because there is incentive in like social media to kind of like pit people against each other.
Social media loves a fight, and in fact, media loves a fight. Without two people opposing each other, you have no story.
Yeah. And so all of that contributes to where we're at, I guess.
Oh, it absolutely does. And in my conflict resolution work, I see that all the time, which is that usually there is not like one shining perfect victim and one awful, terrible perpetrator.
Right.
There's usually a mix of bad actions on both parts. Yeah. And so if you're trying to judge everything in terms of this person's right and this person's wrong, or like the way our justice system does it, right? Where this person, messed up and therefore owes money to this person, then I mean that's just it's a very, very basic view of the world that doesn't describe the reality, the increasingly interdependent and complex reality in which we find ourselves. Yeah. Because it means, for example, and I'm about to soapbox here again, that you can't hold people responsible for things that lots of people helped create, for circumstances that lots of people helped create in small ways. Yeah. And that is unfortunate because a lot of the problems we have on Earth right now, the things that keep all of us up at night are many people bear a tiny bit of responsibility rather than one bad person doing evil things makes it happen. So further, like if my example on theory X and theory Y, people are good, people are bad. Yeah. I mean, any thinking person would have to conclude that people are both bad and good. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, duh. Yeah. Yeah. But you still have a tendency to identify with one more than the other, with one of those more than the other, and that doesn't mean that you aren't taking the full range into account. We just talk about one or the other. Right.
Well, this is a good transition to the next thing I wanted to hit, which is, taking sides of, is it the supernatural or is it a very scientifically measurable reason that X is happening?
Right. And here we're going to have to do some elaborate both-ending, right?
Yeah. Let's define spirituality. I'm doing a quote here. Would you like to go first?
No, you should go first.
I can share, yeah.
Please.
I think when I use the word spirituality, I am using it as a catch-all to describe an intricate and complex scenario of thoughts and experiences that are possibly too interwoven and too nuanced in their layering to be described all at once, or measured or categorized. So, for example, when I describe spiritual growth, what I'm referring to is, an entire universe of a person's experience that I may not be able to describe in a very specific, measured way that I could categorize and apply numbers to. Like, this person used to get C's and now they have an A. It's not something that I can break down super quickly. So I use spiritual as the shorthand to describe that entire part of a person's experience. And when I'm saying spiritual, that's what I'm referring to in my own experience as well.
Yeah, good.
Does that make sense?
It does to me.
All right. How would you describe it?
I think spirituals are things that we don't have a clear explanation for, that are not just a person acting, right? So it can be like a greater connection to people, a sense that something else is happening, a sense of intervention. Sometimes people talk about coincidences where that feel like somebody is being called to something, or that you made a request and the universe responds. I think anytime you're saying the word "the universe" as if it is an actor, it is probably a spiritual matter.
It's used so commonly these days as basically a stand-in for God. Yeah, but people just don't want to say God.
They don't want to say God because they don't want you to make assumptions about their belief systems. So.
So we're kind of in agreement there. It's basically it's that which we are not necessarily in a position to measure with our current technology immediately.
Right. And that which, it's kind of the ineffable.
Right.
And that which we have no really good language for.
Right. And it's interesting because I find it to be such an important part of the human experience. And in my bias, I believe it is an important part of pretty much every human's experience that I've interacted with, even, but then it's a whole different conversation. We're getting to atheism.
Yeah.
it seems to me that when I have conversations with atheists, it is, I don't know, is it like I feel like even atheism has evolved quite a bit. There was a time where it was like a lot like, I don't know, for lack of a better description, angrier. And now it seems to be that most atheists that I talk to would generally kind of agree with a lot of what we're describing. And I don't know. We certainly don't have them here.
I don't know. I haven't talked to any in a while, but I do see evidence of more ability to laugh at oneself from the atheist stuff that I see, which I think is a great sign.
I agree. Yeah. But I also do know that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down.
Yes, I'm trying to not go down that rabbit hole because I could totally go down that rabbit hole.
Totally. Hippie.
Hippie.
Let's define hippie.
I am right now working on a piece for reclaiming the term hippie in the same way we have reclaimed queer and some other things.
Ooh. Give me the TLDR of that.
Well, I'm still working on it. So the with knowing that this may change, right? The idea is that hippie, quote unquote, hippie ideas have been with us certainly in America forever. It's a really huge portion of American thought, and it's because we are inventing something new here. Yeah. And also because of the and even in the course of doing so, all the Europeans drew on Native American ways of thinking and knowledge and ways of thinking about the world. Right. And that incorporates a lot of what people call hippie thinking, which is not necessarily restricted to Native Americans, but indigenous cultures worldwide. Yeah. And that sort of striving for, non-duality in a way that has some commonalities with what we know from Eastern religions, what we know from, and what we often, steal from Native traditions. And basically things that are just not like the Judeo-Christian tradition, basically. A lot of that gets kind of labeled hippie. Right. And to me, a hippie is just somebody who thinks it's a good idea to consider others, consider the planet. Yes, I'm with that. Try to make things better. Right. And that turns into a lot of things you can talk about. Wooks, right, where everybody has maybe a different definition of the hairy people you run into at festivals who don't bring anything and expect you to provide everything for them. Yeah. I heard somebody recently say that the plural of wook. Have you heard this one? No. How, a group of wooks. What would you call a group of wooks? What do you call them? It's a burden.
Oh my God, that's great.
A burden of works. I love that too. But, and so that's part of the things that give hippies a bad name is that they're so, beyond commerce dude that they make you do everything for them, right? That's nobody likes that.
Which is the extreme other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Of
actually caring about people.
Yeah. Right. So that's interesting. So I kind of one of the notes that I had was I did a very quick Google search to see if anybody had written anything about first, second, and third wave hippie culture. And I did not immediately find one, but I imagine it's kind of sidecard with first, second, and third wave psychedelic movements.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to just the Thoreau and the romantic movements of the 1800s. I mean, it's a big. There's always been, the hippies have always been with us.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah.
And, in various times of when people want to reject mainstream culture and go a different direction. So communes and free love in the 60s. Right. But that's still going in a lot of ways. So people now are still, there's a lot of people rejecting society and trying to do their own thing in many ways, probably not always calling themselves hippies. A lot of them probably very right wing. Right. But that with that idea of being more interested in countercultures than in culture.
Right. Well, especially in there is quite a bit of discussion that I've been privy to around how, for example, the hippies that attend Burning Man, our burner circles, are kind of this new hybrid of capitalist and hippie. Whereas in the 60s, there was this sense of we're hippies. And then once they finished college, they ended up settling down and becoming
yuppies.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know that we even have yuppies now. Yuppies are now just adults.
Yeah.
People who consume.
Yeah. Still need to pay for that art project that you're taking out to the middle of the desert and burn.
Yeah, right. Yes. I mean, I'm old enough to know what the original idea with the yuppies were, which is that there were people who were mostly interested in consumption and commercialism and, acting cool without necessarily knowing what cool was.
Well, I guess now you call them hipsters.
Now, hipsters, absolutely. People complain about in Burning Man, the tech bros, that would be the yuppies of yore. Well-funded at low, but needing to borrow culture from everybody else.
That's funny. Yeah, I was talking to a friend a few years ago, and her answer always stuck with me. And I was asking, why is it that hipsters piss people off so much? And I couldn't put my finger on it because I'm like, this just looks like a stylish individual who, they're being super nice and whatever. And then my friend's analysis was that the thing that feels irritating about hipsters is that you meet this person and everything from the outside presents as if you're about to have an interaction with a very artistic, creative person. And then they're just an accountant at so-and-so. Which there's nothing wrong with being an accountant.
Nothing wrong with that.
We need you desperately.
My definition of hipster is a person who has a lot of opinions about art but doesn't create any.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's really good.
And I have been that person. I have 100%.
That's really good. That's really good. We all have annoying personality characteristics. The only thing we can do is call them out.
We all find ourselves insufferable on some level.
Yeah. All right. I had a couple of more notes here to establishment. The word manifestation, I find, can be incredibly irritating to people and triggering.
As I've been investigating all of this, I've been finding that there are kind of little pockets of special lingos for talking about all this spiritual, as we have defined it, stuff, because people need words for it, and it tends to be these really local things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an excellent point. I need a fucking word for this thing, and it's too complex. And I'm sorry the word is triggering.
Manifestation. I mean, right. So if you look at Taoism, and I was very influenced as a young person by this book called The Tao of Pooh. Have you heard that?
Yes, Winnie the Pooh.
Taoism explained through Winnie the Pooh.
I love
I'm going to use that right now.
Yeah.
And they say that Pooh is the uncarved block, right? So he does nothing, and yet everything is done.
Yeah.
And that's manifestation.
I love it. I mean, is there Taoist philosophy and ranger training? Isn't the first step to do nothing?
But it is basically assuming that things will resolve on their own.
Yeah.
And, in statistics, there's a concept called regression to the mean. Let me finish with regression to the mean. So in regression to the mean, the idea is that if you did this exact same study the exact same way a bunch of different times, your extreme results would just kind of start moving toward mean results because extreme expressions just kind of wear themselves out.
Right.
And this is with you doing nothing. So in my survey class, for example, our professor was very clear about, he was like, if somebody was going to pay me to just make people hate a certain politician less, I would take their money, I would poll everybody, I would take their money, poll everybody, go to Hawaii for 6 weeks, come back, poll them again, and we would have gotten them people hating them less. And I wouldn't have had to do anything because of regression to the mean.
Wow, that's amazing. So I guess there's that other story that you told me that I've been excited about sharing.
Oh, this might be the time.
Is it literally is it like the opposite of this example you just gave?
It is the opposite thing. I mean, this was a do nothing, but
yeah.
So I showed up in grad school, and I'm taking research methods first semester, class. Basic for all the PhD students have to take this one class, and it's with this highly decorated statistician.
Yeah.
This guy has, impacted the field, right? And we're there, and it's probably the second week, and he said, and he's basically, and he's one of those kind of old school guys who tells things through personal stories where he knows all the researchers and this thing. And he was talking about when he was a young researcher and that This is a time when you didn't, you didn't take the GRE and fill out applications. Just your professor said, "Hey, Tom, I'm sending you a student to Chicago. Okay, you're going to take him? Okay, good, fine." Okay. Right? So, long time ago.
Yeah.
And he said that they were doing, this was back in the age when they were doing a lot of animal experience, running rats through mazes.
Yeah.
And when he went to go do the animal experimentation studies, he discovered that there were a lot of problems with them.
Okay.
Because of the relationship that the researchers would have with the rats.
Okay.
So you can't handle the rats in front because then now you have a relationship with and you know the rats and they'll run faster for you. You can't even know that you got the rats from like the top rat center in the United States because you'll think those rats are better. And if you think those rats are better, they're going to run faster. So you have to stay really out of involvement with the rats if you want to not influence the experiment. And they're saying this, and everybody's scribbling this down as far as like all the demand characteristics that you have to keep out of the way, and you have to be impartial and all of this. And I'm just sitting here, wait, our thoughts are making the rats run faster? Are you kidding me? Why are we not studying this?
Yeah. Is it like dismissed as like observer effect? Like,
yeah,
do you have anything on that?
Honestly, we were not given a great explanation of mechanisms, which is kind of what the rest of our PhD was about. It was like, if you don't have a mechanism for it, it can't be a real thing. Yeah. But it was just like, make sure you don't, get too friendly with your subjects, and this is why we don't like have our friends as our subjects and all this. And I was just like, but
the rats are reading our minds.
But how are the rats reading our minds?
That's fucking out there. We can categorize this as like maybe that thing that like we just don't have the technology or means to measure quite yet.
And this, thank you for that, is exactly why I have started to actually talk about all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's because I think it's really important that we say as scientists, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's a lot of weird shit that happens that we really can't explain.
Reality is fucking weird.
And that doesn't mean that science doesn't matter, that science should not be paid attention to, that it's all the same anyway, that scientists are so fucked up that they're just, publishing anything, or they're publishing their own biases, or they're, suppressing other people's research. It's just that it's a lot. There's a lot. And even dumb experiments take such an incredible amount of planning and institutional review boards. And oh my God, I mean, just go try to get a master's degree and you'll be like, no, thank you. Right.
I tend to find myself gravitated towards those who are presented with all of this and find the world to be even more miraculous as a result.
Yes. The world is
like,
a miraculous
it is amazing.
Place. It's amazing.
Like, there's this whole rabbit hole that we haven't gone down, like this addiction to certainty, right? Like, it's cool. Like, there's this whole new thing that we can learn about this other thing that we didn't know anything about, that we didn't have the technology for before. And like, we can, all of that makes life so much more exciting and worth living.
It does for me. And I know that, like, we're living in fairly chaotic times. And this is a time when a lot of people go the opposite direction, and they want to reduce uncertainty and have more, and just stay the course in one way of thinking of the world and have that one win and have an authoritarian leader. And, they want a lot more strictures because they would rather live in a slightly negative but orderly world than to live in a chaotic but potentially good world. But I think once you just kind of get over that a little bit, if you can embrace the chaos and the possibility, then how much fun and interesting everything is. And what if you really agree that you are just that humans are not the center of the moral universe, right? But a mere speck in these machinations beyond which we have no control.
Wow.
Right?
Existential terror.
Existential terror. But really, in those circumstances, what is there to do except be nice to each other?
Yeah.
Because we're all working with insufficient information, radically less personal computing power than we would like. Yeah. In a constantly changing world. Yeah. We're all just trying to do the best we can over here.
Right. So it's interesting. I've always enjoyed. I want to share this story. Yeah. Because I've always found it to be a silly and quick and small way to give an example of the power of positive thinking, right? Yeah. In my experience, I'm finding that life just keeps getting more and more fun as I lean into thinking about these things exactly the way that you're describing it, and then in my head calling it manifestation. Because a lot of what that, the manifestation dismissal, usually people say, oh, if I think about a Ferrari enough, a Ferrari will appear in my driveway. That's not how it works, and that's not what it's about. Yeah. And an example that I've used to give a few times was I find that like in every fractal of a day, if we are thinking a little bit more positively, more positive options tend to present themselves, or my mind will be more open to seeing it. And then that leads to the next thing, and that leads to the next thing. And an example for me was when I was flying back from South Africa. It's like I forget, like a 12-hour flight to Middle East, and then another like 12 hours back to the US. And I had really stressed about trying to get a seat on the plane that has legroom because I'm 6'5".
Yes.
And so I somehow was able to get the emergency exit seat, and I'm so psyched to get this seat. And then the gentleman who comes to sit in the middle of so I'm like sitting on like the aisle seat, and I have all this leg room, and I'm like, oh man, this is finally going to be a good flight for my 6'5" ass. And this gentleman who comes to sit in the middle is this very, very large person, like just like the size of 3 times me. And he sits down in the middle seat, and I am squished all the way to the side, and I can barely move, and I'm like completely stuck, right? And I fall into such a fucking victim mindset in my head of, oh, this sucks. God, I hope the employees see how much I'm struggling, and they'll bump me to a different seat. By the way, this gentleman, the sweetest individual you can imagine. He's such a sweet and kind person, and we had just great conversations. As I was squeezed up to the side, just like trying to figure out how to get through this 12 hours, right? Yeah. And I'm continuing to feel sorry for myself. And the flight finishes. I finish the rest of my trip back home, and I go to sleep. The next morning, I wake up, I meditate, clear my energy. And then as I'm journaling, the memory of this flight comes back. And it occurs to me that it would have been such an incredibly easy suggestion to ask this gentleman if he wants to take my seat. His wife could take the center seat because they're already in each other's space. And then I could have taken the window seat, and it would have all been fine.
Oh my God.
But it's just it was such a simple solution, but this very simple solution was just not available to me in my brain.
Yeah.
Because I was so stuck in this victim mindset.
Yeah.
And this was a silly, small, little experience, but take that and multiply it by like 750. And that's what's happening in a day. And when I'm in a positive mindset, I'm going to go out, and out of the 7,000 possible options that are in front of me about which direction to go on the street, or how to hold my pen in my hand, or how my ache in my lower back feels, all of these things are influenced by a little bit of mindset shift, and then a little bit more mindset shift, and a little bit more. And then so when you pile all of that on top of each other, that's what manifestation looks like. I'm manifesting this next positive experience, which leads me to the next thing, which opens me up to this next option, yada, yada. So that's the story I've always wanted to share about that experience.
I'm glad you said that. I think that that's really accurate, honestly. I think that the positive, because we think of positivity in positive psychology as spirals, kind of an upward spiral or a downward spiral. And so with the idea that experiences and emotions and emotional states build on each other, and when we're in a more, one of the basic theories in positive psychology is that when we're in a more positive emotional state, that the evolutionary benefit from having those in the first place is that we make connections with people, and we are more creative, and we expand our resources. We go find new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And that's what that's good for. And the more time you spend in there, the more you can have that. And we're living in a time now where you still need negative states. I mean, negative states often spur you to action, and they close out possibilities, which sometimes are necessary to get everything done, right?
Yeah.
But but the positive states really benefit and expand us, and bring us into new possibilities. And I think that's something that stands out for people.
Right.
Because part of it, of course, is like what you even notice, right? Mm-hmm. So some of manifestation, I would say, is also, and I don't mean this in a trivializing way at all. I'm just going to add this scientific term to it, which is people may have feelings about, but, is self-confirmation.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just confirmation bias in terms of you only remember it when it works, right? Which is probably true.
Good clarification. That's what I was about to ask.
But also, if I were going to tell you as my pal that I really want to go out and see more music this year, and then somebody invites me to a concert, I'm more likely to say yes, because I'm like, oh shit, I said I wanted to do this.
Right.
I want to be in concordance with myself.
Yeah.
And so I will act. It's like, well, I've said I'm X, so I may as well act like I'm X, right?
Yeah.
I may as well act in accordance with what I have stated about is my identity here, stated as my desires. And so it gives you that extra push to notice and act on those things.
Yeah, I've been doing kind of like a daily visualization process, and I have these kind of like morning sort of affirmations that I've been writing that are just very like intentions for the day. Like my intention is to convey love to as many people as I interact with, right? And I have been finding that as I've been doing this process, just the way that you're describing it, more ideas are coming to me about how to fine-tune those morning affirmations in a way that's giving me more clarity and inspiration, and it's making me go, oh, I could totally apply this now in another scenario. There's a kitty walking around us, by the way.
She decided she wanted to be close, and then she was like, nah, actually not.
I love
really.
it. She's like, I want to sit here. Nah, fuck it. I'm going to sit back over here. These are excellent. So these are all kind of like the conversation points we've been having are the building blocks of what we're going to get to in this like next segment. But I wanted to address my brain immediately shuts down when I see the written phrase "science has proven." and I
science. There is no proving in social science, at least. Again, not a hard scientist, but in social science, there's no proving anything.
Right. Can we? Well, let's kind of dissect that a little bit, because I think it's a thing. That phrase is something that I find that I run into often when we're reading things written by quote unquote spiritually leaning literature. And a lot of times they're getting into like, quantum physics and stuff like that. And usually, and I remember like there was a book that was referred to me, and I really appreciated the person that referred it, and I appreciated the book. But as soon as I read that sentence, "science is proven," I'm like, I immediately have lost.
What does it bring up for you? What makes you? What do you think about?
It feels like it's trying to reach for this kind of non-authoritarian way by using authoritarian language.
Ooh, it's saying.
Does that make sense?
It does, because a lot of times people they want to throw in a dash of science so that you won't question them.
Right.
When all good science is just constantly questioning everything.
Well, I would say so is spirituality, by the way. And let's differentiate, by the way, like religion doesn't want you to question it.
Yeah.
But spirituality is a daily process of questioning everything.
Yes. Yes.
Which I guess is that kind of interesting. Now that we're saying that out loud, it looks like science and spirituality have more in common in that regard, because the whole thing is about it's questioning. I want to question everything. I want to
Yeah. And I think that, I don't want to say the difference, but a difference is like when I think about how I know something is true or as it was put to me in grad school, not can I believe it, do I have to believe it?
Right.
Then...
Like gravity, I have to believe,
yeah,
right?
I kind of have to believe gravity. Yeah.
Because cars are real.
Cars are real. They will hit you.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. Because if you don't, you will fall over. I mean,
Right.
and this is there's a kind of triangulation there. There's ways of testing it in other modes. Right. So I'll use a negative example. So I have some family members who are very into conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Right.
So do I. Iranians love that shit. Yeah.
But they often will say, well, here is one explanation for it, and it's an explanation I like. So obviously, we didn't go to the moon because the CIA would want to control how we think about these things. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe the CIA does want to control how we think about things. Sure. Okay, but what about all these other things, right? What about, did we have the technology, the TV technology at the time? The answer is no, we did not. It was actually easier to go to the moon than it would have been to recreate to fake going to the moon, which is hard for us to imagine in this day and age when media can do everything.
Yeah.
But in the 60s, it was different.
Yeah. I love that. I never thought about that explanation. It's literally easier to go to the moon.
and various other things. And okay, so everybody in the CIA has been completely quiet about it this whole time. That doesn't really square with how I know people who know things work. They want to tell you.
Yeah.
And after a few drinks, they will tell you.
Yeah. After sex and after drinks.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's talking.
Right. And also things get declassified after a while. We know a lot, like we know COINTELPRO, that is what used to be a conspiracy theory that was kind of proven from unmasking of documents from that period of time, and that enough time has gone by that we would have some more inklings and clues, and since we don't, I have to assume that we actually did go to the moon.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that kind of triangulation. It's not just endless questioning. And this is where sometimes with the Joe Roganites, this is where I diverge. Because a lot of people will just keep saying questions, and the ultimate thing is, well, we can never know, and we can know nothing. And no, we cannot just settle for not knowing anything.
Right.
Because our human brain does not work that way. We do not like it, and that is just a great way to let people take advantage of us. We have to be able to make decisions for ourselves about what is real and what's not real. And the way that we do that in the extremely difficult to prove social sciences, where we're only talking about like a range of responses and not one response, the only way we know how to do that is by intense triangulation.
Fascinating. I, as you were describing that story, one of the examples that was popping into my head was there was a short documentary I saw. It was like on a Vice channel about they called it surveillance bullying. It's individuals who are under the impression, or they're certain that they're being bullied by like surveillance helicopters and
yes,
being
it's
watched and
an
stuff.
actual psychosis.
Yeah. And this psychologist who was who they were interviewing for the video at the end kind of said it just like this. He's like, are there conspiracies happening in the world? Yes.
Almost certainly.
Yes, it is. Is it serving you to become absolutely certain and aware about every single one of them? That's the question that you have to ask.
It's a really good question. People like the idea of knowing that they're in on it, but then that can totally lead to despair and hopelessness and uselessness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Anyway,
we have so many
things,
so many fucking rabbit holes. Okay, so let me see my notes over here. I had a note here about transitioning into what we do have access to in ways that we can, I don't know, elevate vibrations.
Elevating vibrations.
How can we elevate our vibrations? There was I started meditating in my 20s. I remember at that time it was not as common as it is now.
Yeah.
I also have a memory that acupuncture was not like something that any insurance would cover.
Yeah.
And now it's like pretty common.
It's
Meditation is also like super common. There's apps for it and everything.
Yeah. Your employer may send you to a meditation app as a perk, which is not a thing that I would have imagined in the 90s.
That's nuts. We have I'm aware of a program called Yoga for Warriors, which is like about like teaching yoga to law enforcement and firefighters.
Yeah.
Friend in Oklahoma City is involved with that.
The positive psychology has a lot of overlap with the study of mindfulness. And who's the biggest consumer of positive psychology in the world? The U.S. military.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's get really, really present so we're better at handling the nuclear warheads, I guess.
Yeah. Handle the nuclear warheads and cost us less when you're discharged.
Yeah. Oof. So I am curious about things that that are sort of on the periphery right now, which we are finding there's some scientific backing, some scientific research saying, hey, this is something that is helping the human experience. But maybe it's still sort of like on the fringe where, we're kind of a little bit ahead of the curve a little bit on some of these things. That's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in.
Yeah, interesting.
And I'm wondering, I said in the intro that if I'm officiating a wedding, we're looking for things that we can apply into our ceremony, into our space, that I don't know. I don't have the exact answers, but like some things that we can apply into our ritual, into our space that are sort of like not quite at tinfoil hat level, but not quite, go to the doctor and get this prescription just yet. Like something that's sort of in this like gray area. And I'm curious if there's any that come to your mind, anything you discovered in your research as we were preparing for this.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is something that my husband and I did at our wedding. That was difficult for people, but kind of great.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to describe two things from our wedding that we did. We did a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But one of them...
Because hold on, was it a friend of yours said it's the second weirdest wedding they've ever been to?
Second weirdest wedding they've ever been to. I love that. I want to know what that first one is.
Yeah.
So one of the weirdest things we did was we arranged, instead of having like pews set up in lines, usually you would come up the aisle through the pews. And of course, this is based on a church, and we are not married in a church.
Right.
We arranged all the seats in a big spiral so that we could process through the spiral and greet everybody, like so that we can see everybody and they see us, as we go through. And as we walk to the middle of the spiral, which is where our officiant was waiting for us.
Right.
And this was awesome. But let me tell you, it was hard to break that frame. It was the day before the wedding, and we were trying to get the guys to set up the chairs right, and they would like not do it. And I was like, why does it have to be this way? We said we wanted a spiral, and they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yes, we're sure. Right? And it was very hard to break that frame for them.
That's super. So what was your inspiration for doing the spiral?
I think that we liked the idea of round, but there were too many people.
Okay. Okay.
So we figured out that if we did a spiral, and at the time we were very into Kundalini yoga, and the spiral is a thing that comes up in there a lot. So we were like, oh, this is kind of works, kind of uncommon.
Okay. And I like the idea of like making contact with every single person as you're coming in.
Yeah. So because I always thought, like, when I go to a wedding and I've traveled, thousands of miles to be there, and then I'm kind of way in the back in the pew, does the group even know I'm here? Does this matter? Does my presence matter? And this was a way of making it so that everybody's presence mattered. We also had them all sing to us as we came in too. We gave them something to sing and had them sing as we processed in, and that was pretty cool.
Jumping back to the pedagogy of the oppressed approach, it almost seems like it's a little bit of that shift. The traditional wedding is, and I've had friends, walking down the aisle describing how fucking weird it is to have like 1,000 eyes on you.
Oh, it is. You can watch it when you watch the people, unless they're doing like a pre-planned dance, which I guess gets people out of themselves enough. Yeah. But you can see like the bride's coming up and she's just like, and it's very overwhelming.
But I love the idea that there is an individual connection being made with everyone as you're coming in. So now we're looking at, like, we're activating everybody.
Yeah. And with ours, we really wanted it. We thought, should we just elope because our parents don't need this, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, nah, we want to have it be specifically community. We want our community to support us. This is a community thing, so that's why we did it this way.
Okay. Continue.
We did okay. Here's where it gets a little weirder. I mean, not that this isn't weird, but
It's all weird.
It's all weird. We did a meditation where we stared in each other's eyes for 10 minutes every day. And sometimes we did this on Skype, it was pre-Zoom, because we were not in the same place.
How long were you doing that?
We did that for 40 days.
You did 40 days of 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. And where we would do is silently stare lovingly into each other's eyes.
Wow.
That was a lot.
Tell me about that. It doesn't seem like it should be that difficult.
And yet you feel seen and like you're seeing, and not always in a way that is comfortable. And so at the ceremony, we had, in honor of that, we had everybody do that with a partner, somebody who, often a stranger, whoever they're sitting next to.
Yeah.
We had them do that for 3 minutes. It was wildly uncomfortable. I loved it.
Oh my God. Okay, I love this.
And it was great because, again, we were here as a celebration of love, and we were talking about not just our love, but everybody's love, and just love in general, the love that we all have for each other, and the bonds that come together. And so we found people were talking about that years later as something that really affected them.
The 3 minutes of...
The 3 minutes of uncomfortable staring.
All right. This one looks pretty good.
You want something fringy? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very uncomfortable. But everybody cooperated because it's our wedding and you have to.
Yes. I definitely want to utilize that.
But it was great. I think it was really very powerful for people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next thing I guess I'm looking at is that I'd love to invoke some sort of a prayer. And I'm, there's like the way prayer is generally historically seen and, definitely dismissed. But I'm wondering if there is underlying mechanisms of what has maybe made prayer beautiful and attractive that we can utilize in a ceremony or ritual type setting.
Yeah. So, prayer is really interesting because it's such a big part of the human experience, and yet the only people who really study it scientifically are people who are coming at it from a religious or Christian viewpoint. And
people who are trying to prove it.
People are trying to prove it, right? Or people who are really trying to disprove it.
Right.
And so it's really hard to find good research. I was reading a lot of research on it, and I was kind of like, that's kind of sloppy. I'm not sure how much I believe that. But that said, the act of praying, which is, to my mind, goes not just like in a Christian sense of petitioning the Lord, right? But which implies a certain hierarchy and personal supernatural intervention, but more just like saying to, speaking into the void, for example, or just saying, this is beyond me and I don't know what to do about this, but here's what the situation is.
Yeah.
And being that can bring a certain amount of clarity. If you feel like you're speaking to an all-powerful being who already knows everything, it makes you really clarify what you mean and what you want to say.
Interesting. Okay.
And that has power.
You know what that's reminding me a little bit is that for some time I played with like divination pendulums.
Yeah.
And it just says yes or no and maybe, right? And the more you have to be very, very specific about what you're asking. Yeah. Basically. So like if I just say, for example, does my car need gas? The answer is always yes. Yes, the car needs gas. Does my car need gas because it's near empty and I need to go 47 miles to so-and-so place? Like when you get very, very specific, I find that most often you actually already have the answer.
Yes. And of course, the more specific you are with spiritual tools, the less accurate they can be. Right.
That's interesting. I like playing with the idea of like how we can work together, perhaps like in the ceremony space, to come up with a shared intention setting.
Yeah, and I love that. I love when the people who are at the wedding have intentions, like very, really set intentions together. I think that was part of when we decided to have everybody sing, we decided to have them sing things that were kind of intentions.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I do not remember what they sang.
All right.
I'd have to go look it up. But
how do we describe intentionality?
Intentionality, I'd say it's like it's different than goal setting, because goal means that you're putting a measurement on it.
Right.
And I think intention is more open-ended because it's where, we'll do it when we see it on however it manifests. So it's much less specific.
So intentionality would lean more towards spirituality, and goal setting would lean more towards science.
Yes, I think so. And so, I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and there's actually a fair amount of good research on intentionality versus goal setting for organizations or for productivity.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to say that that setting intentions is better in many circumstances than setting a specific goal, because that way, if you don't quite get there, you're not sad.
Right.
But also you can end up getting to much cooler places because you didn't put such limits on it.
Right. An example of that pops up is that, and you've worked with me on this, in situations where I'm trying to, we call it like shaking the trees, trying to get some gigs. You do that too. You start sending out some emails, like you're just trying to get some work going as freelancers and consultants and contractors.
Yep. And
I have found this experience multiple times where rarely do the people that I reached out to immediately respond and hire me. But yet somehow a gig shows up from some other completely different direction that I did not think about.
Exactly. And this happens to me.
What the fuck is that?
All the time. I don't know. I don't know. See, this is exactly a thing. If I don't know, I have found this over and over with both myself and the people I coach, who largely are entrepreneurs and founders.
Yeah.
And we talk about business development a lot. And I often say, you can go shake the apple tree, but there's some asparagus will come up.
That's really good. That's really good. All right. Well, that's immediately made me think like some intention setting.
Yeah.
But that's a fascinating thing.
And I don't have an explanation for this. I don't have a scientific explanation for this. I can think of,
How do you instruct a person to set intentions? I guess is the question. Is it just a matter of saying it out loud, or do I tell them, I want you to really think about it and believe it? Is that what affirmation is?
I think I want you to really think about it. Not necessarily for like a lot of affirmations. Well, a lot of people get affirmations wrong, and they think it's about trying to make a non-reality into a reality.
Right.
When it's really more about noticing what is already true.
Yeah. That's where like some of the I am statements can get kind of fucked up.
People
because
get
like
dumb about that. I have to say. I mean, I my favorite is like, if you remember the old film American Beauty from like the early 2000s,
yeah.
where she's doing affirmations and she's trying to.
You will sell this house.
I will sell this house today.
Yeah.
Well, you can't make an affirmation about that. That's a great example of trying to turn an unreality into a reality.
Right.
Too specific. It's about you. I will sell this house. How about, if it works better if you're like, this house will sell.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be today.
Right.
Or I will get my needs met. Or the people owning this house will get their needs met.
Right.
So more general helps a lot. That helps. And, so from a scientific basis, you can be like, because you're not actually affecting the universe in some kind of quantum mechanics sense.
Sure,
I will. I'd have to say sure, because we don't really have any reasonable. I have to say this because of your title. I have to make a statement about quantum mechanics and say that there is no reasonable basis for thinking that quantum mechanics affects human behavior.
Yeah.
There is not one. And if you think you understand quantum mechanics, I can guarantee you don't, because no one does. Including the people who've spent their lives studying this.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is no reason to think that quantum mechanics affects human behavior, period. It's much more, the Occam's razor is that human behavior affects human behavior.
So what we have access to right here, that's right in front of us. I think like for example, just even, I am rich. If I don't actually believe that,
if there isn't, so
that's going to stress me out more.
Absolutely. So sometimes, I mean, but on the other hand, you will come up, if you can believe a little tiny bit of it, you'll come up with reasons why you're rich. I'm rich in friendship.
Right.
Or I'm rich on, I have a great head of hair, or whatever it is, right?
My life is filled with abundance.
Yes, and you look around and you say, look at all this stuff. I guess my life is full of abundance. And we do work that way. You know, we tell these stories about ourselves. And that's the way in which positive affirmations work positively, is that way we can notice, as opposed to being fixated on that want or that lack or that negative thing, which we're so often fixated on.
Right.
Because as humans in general, we have a negativity bias. We see the lack, we're focused on the next thing, we're focused on the threat. That has been a great way of keeping us alive all these years, and it's not really great right now, where our lives really are, at least in the Western world here, filled with abundance.
Right. Can we give listeners a couple of things based on, you know, that all this crap that we've talked about, that people that we can apply and implement today, like right after this podcast is over? You can put down your headphones and start thinking in this term. We've already, of course, discussed the power of positive thinking multiple times. Positive
thinking, and I would call it positive noticing.
Positive noticing. I really like that. Okay.
That's my edit on positive thinking. Yeah. It's not about what will happen in the future. There's a lot of people, it's another rabbit hole, who say that all of human consciousness and thought is just about planning and preparing for the future.
Okay.
But if we're thinking about it in terms of noticing what's around us now, noticing that, hey, my knee doesn't hurt. I mean, my knee doesn't usually hurt, but it doesn't hurt today, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right? And that tends to multiply. And that tends to help us be on positive spirals and give a little more grace to ourselves than others. I will say the other thing you can do is self-acceptance, and I mean radical self-acceptance.
Tell me about that.
That means noticing what you do, and instead of having immediate judgments about it, but noticing it with curiosity. Oh my God, that's interesting. I wonder why I do that. You know, as a phenomenon, rather than, oh shit, I shouldn't do that because that doesn't match the model of whatever I'm trying to do or be or what I've been told or whatever.
Applying, curiosity to things. That's one of the, it's a Zen Buddhist approach in meditation, which they call like beginner's mind.
Beginner's mind.
Coming at everything without, because like, no, I know. When people say, I know, a lot of times that ends up like really kind of painting us into a corner. Like, hey, have you tried this thing? Yeah, I already know how my brain works. It's not going to work.
Oh, that drives me crazy as a person who's trying to help people. But so many people are like that.
Yeah.
And they just repeatedly are like that. That in itself is the problem. But yeah, exactly. And if you start to accept the things about yourself that you can't change, the ones that you have a really hard time to, there's like an amazing transformation that can happen. Yeah. Your life can get so much simpler.
Yeah.
So radical self-acceptance.
Okay, that's a good one. How could a listener today start to approach knowing less, unknowing? What is something that we could implement and just make it a thing to do?
What a great concept. I think, again, back to noticing, I think I would probably ask somebody to journal about a time when they were, think about a time when something went okay.
Okay.
And think about what...
Not even amazing, just okay.
Yeah, just okay.
Yeah.
Like bad things didn't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then...
I drove here and I didn't crash.
Yeah. Then think about what... see if you can put yourself back in the mind of before you were sure that this was going to come out okay. And think about all the different things that you were doing and thinking about.
Right.
Sometimes, though, so that can be hard. If you have a little bit more time, I would say what's great to do is make predictions about how things are going to go, things that are important to you. Write them down in a small notebook.
Okay.
And then wait to see how it all plays out and compare. Right? When I was doing a really elaborate and difficult consulting gig with a very large company that was going to be a year-long thing. And every week there was a new thing that everybody was all worried about. So I started keeping a journal. Upper management is worried about this. Yeah. The consultant team is concerned about this. The people on the ground I talked to are concerned about this. And then next week I would do the same thing. Yeah. And then I would say, but then I would also say, and I would note where the concerns ended up being legitimate because that ended up being a thing, and where they did not actually come to fruition.
Right.
And this was like the most immense teaching tool. And so if you can start keeping track of like what this will help hone your intuition about what's going on, and you'll notice that most of the time things come out okay.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I know we got to cut out here.
I could talk for about 5 more days about all this.
Well, hopefully soon you're starting your own podcast on this topic so that I can just refer people there.
But for the time being, you can go visit my website at kimperkins.com and get on my newsletter page, and you will hear more about all of this.
She'll talk your head off.
I will talk your head off.
I can implement this right now. I can tell you this, and this is the creative practice. I'm going to let all of this digest and clear energy, because one of the spiritual approaches to creativity is that there's sort of asking mode and then there's allowing mode.
Ooh, I like it.
And done a lot of fucking asking here. There's been a lot of conversation, a lot of dissecting, a lot of information. And really the trick right now is to just walk away from this.
It is.
For 72 hours and not even think about it.
I applaud this approach.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk away from this. Maybe I'll check in with the listeners. You know what? Actually, I 100% will. In February, I'll tell you how the wedding went.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
That month will end with me having done it. But I'm going to take all this information. I'm going to process it. We're going to come up with some fun ritual and ceremony that will activate the audience. And if we have any interesting links or anything to share, we'll throw them in the show notes.
Sounds good.
This is the best thing. But thank you, Kim.
What an incredible
Awesome.
pleasure to talk
I always
about
enjoy these.
So many of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We always do these where maybe we'll just do this once a year or something. You are now listening to the sounds of DJ Maxx Polishuk, Ranger call sign Foosball. Max is one of the sweetest, dopest participants in our community that I've ever known, and I've had the pleasure of stumbling into him on multiple continents. He rangered at Africa Burn the year that I attended and gave me a cool little trinket, as well as multiple other burns. This full vinyl set that you're hearing was recorded at BRCU, that's Black Rock City University, at Burning Man of 2013. Black Rock City University, BRCU, was also where I was served a shot of 3-day infused habanero tequila, the tiniest taste of which made me lash out at the bartender. Why would anyone drink this? To which he responded, obviously, why would anyone go out into the desert and do LSD? Touche, sir. We're playing a half hour of Max's set. The link to hear this whole thing, this whole funky set, will be over in the show notes. Go follow his SoundCloud, the link of which to that is also in the notes. Vegas, if you got leads on photography work, consulting gigs, and or crash pads, I'm on the hunt for all of that and more as I begin my process of planting roots in Nevada. Come at me, Vegas. If you like today's episode, text it to 3 of your friends. We don't advertise this show, or any of the following we have is all built strictly on word of mouth from you, my dear listeners. So we thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our quantum hearts. All of these links and shit are over at burnerpodcast.com. Burner Podcast is brought to you by a team of revolving volunteer producers based in various parts of the United States. The Burner Podcast theme music, America's Horse with No Name remix, is produced by Joe Man. He is out of Austin, Texas. Until next time, love, light, and all that other crap. Take us back to the playa. DJ Maxx Polishuk.
Are you ready for today? side.
You have reached mailbox number 808. To hear your messages, please hit the bass key.
burnerpodcast.com.